Welcome to the Joy Work Show, the podcast that goes beyond the surface of business right to the heart, to explore the real joy and the stories behind success, not just the moments of celebration, but the challenges that pave the way for them. Hiya, I'm Diane, and on this podcast, we know that joy isn't just about the good times. Often the greatest joy comes right after the greatest challenge. Today's episode is a real treat because we are immersing ourselves into the world of storytelling, resilience, and big life pivots. My guest is a brilliant Lou Emerson, a solicitor turned cozy crime writer who swapped legal briefs for gripping whodunits. And if you don't know what cozy crime is, don't worry, neither did I. But trust me, you're well aware of it and you probably enjoy it more than you know. But this is more than just a career change story. Lou opens up about the real struggles behind the transition, balancing work and family, parenting and advocating for a child with autism, and navigating life when vertigo and anxiety thought they might try and take her down. We're talking about how personal challenges shape creative work, why cozy crime is more than just a genre, it's a pure escape, and the power of storytelling to heal, connect, and create joy. If you've ever thought about making a bold career leap or using creativity as an outlet, or if you didn't believe you were creative at all, then this one's for you. But as always, it is so much better to hear from the person themselves. So let's go. Hi Lou, and welcome to the Joy Work Show. I am totally delighted that you are here today. As you know, I am a big fan of what you do, but it's always better for people to tell the audience how they do it, what they do. So tell me, Lou, who are you? What do you do? And how did you get here?
Well, thanks for having me, Diane. It's really lovely to chat with you, as always. It's always fun. So let's hope we can make a few people laugh along the way. So I'm Lou. I'm Lou of many names, as people keep telling me. So I'm Lou Emerson, and I'm also Lou Collins because I write under the name Lou Collins. In a nutshell, I get away with murder, fictionally, of course. I send mysterious packages to strangers, and somehow it's all perfectly legal.
How?
Okay, that tends to set the tongues wagging.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us more.
I write cozy crime, which, if you're not familiar with the term, it's like Midsummer Murders. So programs like, or films that you might have seen, like Agatha Christie, was kind of the original beginnings of the cozy crime genre, although hers are a little bit darker than the current kind of cozy crime. So it's murder mystery, but set in those lovely small communities where everybody knows everything about everyone, and there's lots of gossip and there's lots of, scandal and people doing horrible things to each other, but with a dash of humour, which is slightly strange, but
I know
it works.
when I wasn't aware of cozy, well, I suppose I was, but I didn't know the terminology cozy crime until I met you. And then I used to laugh and say to you what my mum and dad would watch at 9:00, Death in Paradise type. It's sunny, there's Barbadian music, it's all lovely, it's all happy. Oh, but somebody's died. I mean, and not only died, murdered. So it's always kind of been a strange one for me, but I'm coming round to the world of cozy crime and coming round to the way that you describe it, which I won't spoil. I'm sure I'll ask you a question that will lead us down that in anyway. So how did you get into cozy crime? Where did that, was it something that you were passionate about before, or a hobby or a joy, or what was it that...
That's a really good question, actually. And when I was thinking about talking to you today, it was interesting because it gives you a chance to reflect on a lot of things. I think that maybe you don't, when you're busy and you're doing things, you don't really necessarily stop and look back. I've always loved, and still do, true crime. I like anything crime involved, mainly I think because I'm very nosy, and I'm absolutely fascinated by the things that make people tick. and just kind of like circumstances that people find themselves in and how people can end up doing the worst things to each other that you just wouldn't expect. So I've always had that sort of slight morbid fascination with, you know, sort of true crime podcast, true crime on television. So it's always been an interest of mine. As I say, mainly because I'm nosy. But when I decided to write a book, which is a whole nother story, which I'm sure we can get to, it was very much like, what can I write that I would enjoy? And I love watching thrillers. I love like reading them. I love watching them. But to me, writing one didn't really light me up. It didn't make me think, oh yeah, that would be exciting or fun to write, because I do have this side of my personality, which I think is probably getting worse as I get older, which is that I do like a good laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of like this slightly ridiculous, farcical kind of British, I kind of call it British humour, but I don't know necessarily if that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like that really old-fashioned type, slapstick type.
Was that
You
like
know,
Fawlty Towers, isn't it?
yeah, it's kind of like, you know, really bad Benny Hill, you know, like, do you remember? I don't know, you're
I do.
probably too young. You know, like the
It almost
opening.
nearly did the theme tune there as you. I'm still going to do it.
I know.
Oh, but yeah, that's immediately what came into my head.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, you know, French and Saunders, Monty Python.
Yeah. I think that is a very British sense of humour because it's dry
Yeah,
and it's self-deprecating and taking the mickey out of ourselves. I think that we're very, very good at.
yeah. So I was like, well, how can I combine
Yeah.
murder with like cracking up and giving myself something to laugh about? Because at the time when I started writing, things in my life were pretty dark. It's probably an understatement. And so I kind of stumbled on cozy crime as a genre, even though I've always watched it. I've always watched those kind of like murder mystery type things. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to write that, because I can choose to write things that interest me, excite me, entertain me, make me laugh, because writing is blooming hard. It's hard work. It's, you know, it's slog, it's toil. People have a very sort of romantic idea of what it's like to be an author. And oh, it's great. It's good fun, but it is hard work. So you need to be writing something you love, that makes you entertained when you're coming up with ideas and things.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
so I
think
kind of
when you
fell
do it,
into it.
yeah. Well, I think when you do it from that sense, when you do it from a joy or a passion or a love, then the readers are much more likely to enjoy it because there's not that, like you say, it's hard no
It is
matter
hard.
what you try and write. But
Yeah.
if you're trying to write something that feels forced or that you don't enjoy, I can't imagine that it would then be something that anybody else would get joy from, you know? So you kind of talked there a little bit about finding it at a time that was quite dark. Do you want to share kind of why and how that kind of, because you're not always been a writer?
No, I haven't always been a writer. Yeah, so I mean, it probably makes more sense to sort of start at the beginning, really, in the lead up to it. I actually was a solicitor in BC. I say to people, in BC, I was a solicitor before children. So before children, I was a solicitor, which often makes people either yawn or run for the hills when I tell them that. Because I think people do have a bit of a jaded view of lawyers and kind of what they're like. But yeah, so I left school, I went to university, I did a law degree, then I went to law school, which is a year, and then I trained for 2 years. So it's sort of 5 years, a bit longer than that, to, do your degree and then train and what have you. And then I worked in a law firm, and I did that for about 15 years. And by the end, I was running a branch office of a major litigation firm. So, so a pretty sort of high powered, kind of managerial type role with, like
law thrown in.
with law thrown in. So long hours, lots of stress. The managerial side isn't necessarily something you're sort of prepared for when you go into a legal career. Most people I know go into law thinking that they're going to help people and that, it's rewarding in that sense.
Are you not going in to run a business and manage people?
Yeah, exactly. So that came as a bit of a shock, but I did it and I did enjoy it, but it didn't light me up, shall we say. Not in the way that I thought it would when I decided age 11 that that's what I was going to do, which is interesting, isn't it? Because I think, when you're younger and obviously with the benefit of experience, you realise that maybe the decisions you make are perhaps coloured by,
Well, this is the thing.
expectation and,
Yeah,
all those
I
kinds of
always
things.
say this about, like, I find it terrifying that we ask 14, 15, 16-year-olds to make definitive decisions about what they want to do with their lives. And I understand if they want to be a lawyer or a doctor or a teacher, and that is true, like, longing for doing those things, because there will be children that's what they want to do and they will stick to it and they'll now be in thriving careers living the life of their dreams because that's what they dreamt of from teenager or younger. But because we ask them all to do that, I think there has to be like a caveat to say, like, if you want to be one of these things, do you understand it takes all this training and time to do it? So really think about it if you want to do it. But if you want to do, crack on, here's how the system supports you. But for everybody else, just try your best, because you don't have to get these exam results and do this if you just want to start your own business, go out and find out how to just get a job and work, try writing, try whatever it is. Because when I didn't have I never had I want to be when I was a teenager. I did go and do an English degree. So I do have a love for, as we have discussed, the written word, writing. I would love to write a book one day, but it's just not something that's happened to me. I then went into the world of business and I did fall in love with that. And I continue to be in love with that. But I do find it fascinating when, on both sides, like you say, it didn't light you up the way that it did. But I do find it fascinating when people really, really want to do a thing from such a young age. Where did that come from for you? Where is that? What was the external factors for that?
I don't know. I think like you said, when we're young and we're inexperienced and we're existing in a system which pushes you very early on to make decisions about who you are, what you're good at, what success is, what success isn't, it can be quite easy to kind of absorb that and then make decisions that you think are coming from you, but actually they're not. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
So
makes
like
complete sense.
at school, I was the nerdy SWAT, I was the rule follower. I was the one who people picked on because, I did well in exams and they all thought I was, up my own behind kind of thing because I
Because
was
you work hard.
academic. Yeah, I was academic. I worked hard. I always did well, at things, exams and that kind of academic-y stuff. So I think very early on, that was my persona, that was,
It became
like,
who you were.
yeah, kind of, teachers were like, oh, you're so good at X and Y, you really need to be going down the university route. These are the sorts of professions that you would be open to you because, you're good at these things. And words, obviously, as a lawyer, words is still a big part of that, as is arguing about things. And I'm quite proficient at arguing about things, using words to be right.
Uh-huh.
Again, which didn't win me many friends at the time. So I was kind of like, I literally was that geeky sort of odd one out type, didn't have that many friends really, got picked on quite a lot.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there was sort of a lot of, I suppose jealousy is probably the word,
Well, no, because I'm sitting here thinking, like, when does it go from, like, you get applauded throughout your life if you're a hard worker, which is a whole nother podcast episode in itself. But why in school was it that those that were hard workers were picked on, were bullied, were seen as the outsiders, that those that tried? Because even when you think about, like, the sports people. So I went to a really sporty school and I was really good at sports. I was part of that circle, but I was also part of the English circle. So I lived in a very strange parallel universe of the groups of people that I hung around with. And when I think about the sports people who were put on a pedestal by their peers, it was the sports people who almost came natural to and had a natural talent. Whereas there was people I know who worked really, really hard at sports because it was what they really wanted to do, even from an academic point of view, that were still seen as an outsider. Whereas these other people who were just naturally the gifted and the beautiful were put on this pedestal from their peers. And when does it become that hard work is actually applauded in our lives by our peers? And it is obviously once you get a lot older, but it's like you say, it is that jealousy thing, is that thing of, well, I can't do that, or I can't work as hard, or I'm not as intelligent, or I'm not as this thing. So, and actually it's the environment, because if the teachers are applauding you for being a hard worker and being an academic and telling you the universities you could go to, those that are bullying you and making you the outsider are probably being told the opposite. So they're like, well, I'm not going to like you because the teacher says this to you and they say this to me. And it's just the system is a very archaic system. And it terrifies me, actually, my children going into it. But it's just that thought of, you're told to work hard, but don't work too hard. You're told to succeed, but don't be too successful. I think it's a bit tired, to be perfectly honest. And I think, I know we'll probably go into this in our joy questions because I know what your answers have been, but that success can look different for many. And I take it that's where you got to in your law career, where you were like, this isn't lighting a fire. I am, by everyone around me, I am successful. I have a career. I have no doubt the trappings of a career. I have all these things around me, but I'm not getting lit up. So what changed for you?
Well, I had babies.
Isn't it the same old story? The same old story for everybody.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, which for me was a big thing because, to be honest, I never actually saw children in my future, like all the way up to probably after I got married, really. And I didn't get married till I was 30, 31. I don't know why. Again, I think maybe it was that weight of expectation and that weight of, I kind of felt like, I kind of feel now that when I look back at that time, I sort of think that I'd almost defined myself by needing to be this success, needing to be, having this, kudos type career and all those kind of things. And children didn't really fit in with that because I didn't see that as success, which I think is quite sad, isn't it?
It is, but I totally resonate with it because I was told at 16 that the likelihood was slim and to think about another option. Which at 16, it was total water off a duck's back. I'd been poorly for a little while, and all I was interested in was getting well enough to go out with my friends. To be perfectly honest, that was all I was interested in. And I never really gave it a second thought. I remember having a serious boyfriend who I then thought, well, I better tell him. Because if he really wants them, I better tell him that this is a kind of no-go for us. So I remember doing that in my 20s. And then after that, I didn't really give it much thought. And looking back, I now realise that I put it in a box and put it to the back of my brain because I still think I've got eternal youth now. So, it's certainly in my 20s, I thought I was going to live forever. Absolutely. And did my damnedest to make sure I tested it at every point. But it is sad when you look back and think that I just compartmentalised that. And it wasn't until I met Ash and I looked at him and I thought, you need to be a dad. That's part of your story. And for him, he hadn't thought about not being a dad. He was just like, that's just what you do. You meet somebody, you get married, you have babies, you get a good job, and you live life. That's very much, he's very much not like that now after being with me for over 10 years now. But yeah, very much. And I didn't meet Ash till I was in my early 30s. So then it was very much, very quickly, I was kind of like, I think I want a baby, but I don't know if I can. But I've not really done, I'd had lots of tests and operations, but I'd never asked my fertility to be checked again because it was a non-fact factor. So it wasn't until I had that and I thought, oh, right, I want this with you. I never, ever, ever felt like that with anybody before at any point in my life. And there was no point when I turned 30, didn't hear a clock ticking, didn't hear anything like that. I was just like, I'm 30 and this is brilliant. I'm living a great life. I work hard, I play hard. That's what I was interested in. But then meeting that person, that's what changed it. And then there was a whole other story of then I had babies much later. But yeah, it is sad. And like you, I do look back and I do think, where were you keeping that? And was it truly just that you looked at Ash and thought you needed to be a dad, or was it you finally allowed yourself to think that this might be something that you want to?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my situation's very similar, that I met my husband. I mean, to be fair, we'd known each other for a long time, but when we sort of finally got together, it was the same. It was like obvious to me that, he would, it wasn't that he wanted to be a dad, he just expected that he would be a dad.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same sort of thing. I mean, he's exactly the same now. Like, if we see a baby or whatever, he's just like, he's making a beeline for the baby. We call him the Pied Piper in our house, which sounds a bit wrong because sometimes we're a bit like, oh no, maybe we shouldn't be saying that this day and age. But he
Maybe
literally,
that doesn't work in 2025.
he's just like, he's just like a magnet for small children. Any small child, on a train or, wherever we are, he sat there playing peekaboo or, whatever. He's obsessed. He just loves little people. He really does. So, yeah. So then it was baby time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, similar to you, my sort of baby journey wasn't particularly straightforward. I had a couple of miscarriages, which were very difficult.
Did
And
you
then
have them before you had the children or in between?
So I kind of laugh about it now. It's not funny, but I kind of say to myself that my body seemed to need to have a practice run before it could actually deliver, before it could deliver. So I had one miscarriage before my daughter was born, and then I had my daughter. I had a horrendous birth with her. She was a huge baby that they couldn't get out because I was very small. I kind of wasn't sure I was going to have any more because it was very, very traumatic. And then I decided, no, I wanted her to have, a sibling. Then I had another miscarriage and then I had my son. So obviously during that period, I was at home, I wasn't working. Because funnily enough, law firms who you'd think would be very, very even-handed about offering returns to work for women, bearing in mind all the legislation, actually, it wasn't possible to do.
Honestly, it just blows my mind that we live in a society where last week we were celebrating that mothers who lose their children are actually going to get some maternity leave, paternity leave. I'm not quite sure the wording they used for it, but some leave. Because to expect somebody to go back to work after any kind of loss, never mind a child, is just bonkers. Just completely and utterly, and it's inhumane is what it is. It's completely inhumane, and the systems aren't set up for women and mothers.
No.
And it's parents now, because I know that they affect dads. I know in our house, the conversations that we have, that I decided to be the primary carer, and the impact that has on me, but then also the impact it has on Ash because he's the non-primary carer, so he's the one that's expected to go out and do X, Y, and Z. And it's just baffling that we need to have these conversations and how difficult it still is to maintain. And they've put up the women's pension age, but yet more women are leaving the workplace, and there's still age discrimination, and it is baffling. And as you say, you would expect law firms to be at the forefront of law and changing the law and being the exemplaries, but quite often we find it's the complete opposite.
Yep, unfortunately, that's, that is the reality of.
So did you leave after
world.
your daughter was born, or was it?
Yeah, so I did discuss with them about, a slightly different return to work, maybe, working maybe 2 or 3 days a week. But because I was the manager of the office, I was very much told, well, your role is a full-time role, which, I do see that, but I do think sometimes the corporate world needs to take a very long, hard look at the skill sets they lose when they can't be flexible about, maybe job sharing or those kinds of things, because I can be pretty certain that them trying to replace me
costs way more money.
is crazy, because let's face it, I knew that business inside out. I'd been running that office for 5-6 years.
No, and it's such a catch-22, and it is really difficult. And I've often, probably too often, put myself in the employer's shoes because of the roles that I did. And there's certainly decisions that I look back on as a senior person in a business that I would make completely differently now from having a lived experience. I did go back in between the two babies, went back pregnant, which they were delighted about. Didn't realise that I was doing that. And I was there for 6 months. And in that 6 months, and I went back 3 days a week. So they were completely flexible. They worked around me. We tried to find the best solution for everybody, but it just didn't work. It just didn't. So even when they try, because of the systems that are in place, and it goes back to that, like, my employers didn't say you have to come back full time. That's a full time role. But it was a full-time role, and there wasn't enough adjustment in anything else for me to still be the person that I needed to be to fulfill that role and do it in 3 days. And not only do it in 3 days, because of the childcare system, I had to leave my work at 4 to make sure I was at nursery for 6. And the way that our roads are and things like that, it's just, so I was like, I have to give 2 hours out of my day for the children and the business because of, and I only lived like 15 miles away from where I worked. It wasn't like I was this massive commute where you find a job closer to home. 15 miles. And yeah, that's what I had to do, so that I had to make sure. And it meant some days I was there at 5:10, but it also meant some days I was the last parent rushing in because I just could never tell what the traffic was going to be like. And that's when I got to my second child. I was just like, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work for anybody, for me to be that far away from our childcare in a time constraint. And we need to find a different way for it to work. And it was a real shock to me. And I think being an older mum as well, that you've lived this life up to, and you can't truly understand until. So when I say that I would go back and do things differently, I could never truly understand what it was to be a mother and work, and try and make it all work, and also wanting to work. This isn't just about people who need to go back to work. This is about people who want to, and who have ambitions and drive, and that it's okay to say that I want to be a working, ambitious mum, as much as it's okay to say I want to be a stay-at-home mum. I'm ambitious for my children. That's, both of those scenarios are okay, but you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And it just seems very unfair.
Yeah, I agree. I think while I was expecting my daughter, my kind of second in command, who was my best friend and is still my best friend, she'd had her son a year before and she'd come back to work. And I think it was really an eye-opener for me to see her trying to work part-time, but actually still being given as much work as someone who was working full-time, dealing with the nursery issues, dealing with a child who wasn't always very well, and that whole juggling thing. I just knew that I knew that just isn't, it's not how I wanted
Well, nobody wins.
things to be. No.
And not even
No.
nobody wins. It's not about winning, I suppose, but nobody thrives. It becomes an existence and a constant checklist
It does.
of stuff rather than living a life.
Yeah. But it was tough because obviously we went from, 2 incomes, and my husband's younger than me, so he was kind of just starting his career, whereas mine was, a lot more established. So it didn't just halve our income. It had a much bigger impact.
Mm-hmm.
So we suddenly found ourselves with a baby and not the biggest income.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think, maybe we made the wrong decision and that he should have stayed at home. But as it is,
it's like he's just at the start. He's
Yeah.
just training. If he doesn't get established, we were
Yeah.
in a really similar position. Ash is younger than me, and I'd always kind of been not the breadwinner, but I'd always earned the most money. And now we were going to be in a position. Well, one, when I went back part time, I wasn't going to be earning the most money, and then when I eventually left and started the business, it was very much, and I did feel like if we can survive 2 maternity leaves back to back, I can launch a business, because it's not exactly been money free for all of these last few years because of that. But it's like you say, it's those decisions that you make, because we could have made a decision for me to just go back and him to stay at home. But my heart just broke because I thought, well, now that I've opened myself up to having children, I want them, and I want to be here, and I want to be the person, and I don't want to hear it from somebody else. And we have had conversations with Ash. She's like, sometimes that's what I feel like. And I'm like, yeah, well, you didn't grow them. I did. That's just the way it needs. I'm calling the trump card. And like you, I had 2 absolutely horrific births. So yeah, my body will never be the same again. So yes, I will.
Yeah.
I'll call that card. But yeah, I just want to be there.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think particularly when they're small, I think I always had it in my mind that I would go back to my career. But when they're small and when they're growing and changing and doing new things every day, the thought of someone else having that experience and not me, and knowing that, like, particularly after my daughter, when I was fairly sure I wasn't going to have another one, that just didn't make sense. Like, I'm quite a logical sort of, I quite like things just so, and that made no sense to me whatsoever. Why would I have gone 30 odd years saying I'm not going to have a child, to then having a child, to then saying, oh, I'm going to give this child to someone else to see all the things that they're going to do, and I'm not going to be there. That didn't seem logical to me. So it just kind of wasn't an option. And then, as it turned out, it was clearly just meant to be, because I had my son, and pretty much from the first few months, it was very clear to me that he wasn't developing in the same way that my daughter was. And he just was, it's difficult to describe. He was just a really anxious baby. He was, you couldn't, like, he literally had to be sort of, like, up with me all the time. And I know some babies are fussier, but this was more than that. He was very unhappy. He was a very unhappy baby. He was a very demanding baby. I don't know. It's just, there isn't anything specific.
How did you know that was different to, like, it must have been difficult. So if you have a girl first and then you have a boy and the boy's different, you might put it down to the fact that one's a girl and one's a boy. Then you also might put it down to, like, my second is very clingy. She's definitely much more a mummy's girl than her sister was. But I certainly don't think there's any At the moment, she's 2.5, so I don't know. But there's nothing that is concerning me. There's nothing that's come up with. She had her health review a couple of weeks ago, all completely fine. They think she's really. I thought she had a problem with her speech. They're like, no, she's completely advanced, and that's obviously just my memory remembering her sister putting sentences together I thought was the same age as what Jamie is, but it evidently wasn't, because so I know there's no kind of learning development or anything there at the moment, or any kind of neurodiversity or something, but you knew it was different at that point. What do you think that was? Is it literally like mother's instinct?
I don't know. It's really hard, isn't it? I mean, I think that's probably kind of the way I explained it to myself. I just had this instinct that, he was different. But I don't know. There were clear signs. I mean, obviously as a baby, I said, he was very fussy. You couldn't kind of leave him. I know this sort of like the swaddling and thing is definitely, a thing that we do, and that's kind of something that's happened over the last sort of 10, 15 years. But literally with him, you couldn't just lay him somewhere and allow him to be sort of open in the space. You could see that he was like, just his response. He was very much on high alert all the time. He was very sort of reflexive. So like, any kind of stimulus, any kind of noise, he was reacting to things in a much more extreme way than just a baby who's interested and sort of looking around. And then obviously as he started to develop from those baby years, those things kind of got more marked. So like trying to wean him was just horrendous. He would like just be spitting everything out and like gagging every time you tried to put anything in his mouth. He wouldn't wean at all. And then when we kind of got to sort of more the toddler stage, he started eating a few, but it was very much kind of like the beige type food. And he would have these kind of rages, like people call them meltdowns. They say, oh, my child had a meltdown. I hate that phrase. I really do. And I've used it in the past, he's having a meltdown, he's having a tantrum or what have you, but it isn't a meltdown. It's an anxiety response. That's what you're seeing, when a child just completely reacts to a situation in a way that seems very over the top to, the thing that you think has caused that response. They go into fight or flight mode, which obviously, we all do. But in children, they haven't learned, like how to sort of deal with situations, how to modulate their responses to things. So it's much easier for them to go into that sort of fight or flight stage. And he would throw himself onto the floor and he would headbutt the floor. He would hurt himself and things like that. So when you're seeing that, it's fairly obvious that isn't necessarily.
Yeah, like my girls will throw themselves on the floor and have those moments, but at no point will they might endanger others around them when they do it, but they're not going to do something to specifically hurt themselves.
Yeah.
So what did that then look like for you? So was that the kind of final decision of, I need to be at home now and I need...
Yeah, I don't know if it was actually a conscious decision, I think it's just circumstance. Sometimes you find yourselves, don't you, with certain circumstances. And so it's just inevitably that you have to deal with what's in front of you. And that was what was in front of us. The thought of him going to a childminder or like even taking him to playgroup, was just fraught with problems. And it always was, and he started when he got scared or, when there was a noise or something, he would bite somebody, because, and again, people think, oh, that people's knee-jerk reaction to that is, oh, that's terrible. Biting is a really sort of savage thing. It's what animals do and things like that. But actually, it's not. It's actually a normal fear response to do whatever it takes to get out of the situation that is terrifying you. So any kind of response, like hitting somebody or biting somebody, they're actually all the same. It's all the same type of response. But it was really difficult. There was a lot of things to navigate that were, much more complicated. than the situation with my daughter. You know, she went to playgroup, she loved it, she made lots of friends, she went to school, they all loved her. You know, it was just like the experience between the two children was absolute chalk and cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't have been more difficult, couldn't have been more different. So yeah, I mean, it was obvious that he was going to need a lot more support, but also practically speaking, I needed to navigate a lot of things for him, and I needed to navigate a lot of things with other people who maybe didn't understand why he was responding in those ways, or
And you've also got the family unit. The family unit's it's getting the word right, isn't it? Having to manage and learn along with. Because for your daughter, that would have been like, it's difficult enough being the elder sibling when a younger one comes on, and you have to be patient and you have to wait. And because you're the eldest, even yesterday, saying to my eldest daughter, and she wanted to do something, I'm like, we can't do that today because Jamie can't do that. So, and Jamie's just going to want to copy you. And I thought, how unfair is that? That I'm trying to, but I had to keep everybody safe. So that was the kind of the ultimate decision that was made. But it is difficult being the elder sibling. So being the elder sibling of somebody who has more difficult needs that need to be met, that must have just, even that alone, before you even think about the outside world, must have been so difficult to navigate.
Yeah, it was, because you know, despite my suspicions, which were more than suspicions, like we didn't really get any worthwhile support, advice, or anything from any sort of medical professional that we, you know, sought help from. So we managed to get a referral to a paediatrician when he was 3, I think, because I felt very much that he was autistic.
Mm-hmm.
So we did manage to get a referral. The paediatrician at the time, and obviously this is going back a way now, said that we would never get it. These were her words. You will never get an autism diagnosis because he's talking and he's very articulate, which of course now I think probably wouldn't happen.
I know, we're going back like 15 years-ish.
Yeah, so my son's 18. So yeah, about 15 years. So we kind of left that appointment with, well, where does that leave us? And then when he went to school, when he went to primary school, like we then encountered a whole new level of nightmare, like a daily nightmare, because obviously his behaviour escalated quite considerably in a school, you know, in that very sort of rigid school environment that he just couldn't cope with, really.
It amazes me how many children with autism, ADHD are in mainstream education. And I have friends who are teachers, and when they tell me stories of the level of, I don't even know, of the severity of the autism work, because I know lots of people with autism and ADHD could function particularly well in those systems and in mainstream education. When they're telling me stories about children who are finding days incredibly difficult because of where they are being educated, it's heartbreaking. And to just think that they're having to do it. And these kids are going in, day out. They're not even absentees. You know, they're going in, day out. And to me, when I hear the stories, it's like they're being put through hell.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of torture, I think, is the way I sort of came to. And again, I think my parents were both teachers, and my sister was a teacher for a long time. So I do come from a sort of an upbringing of education is important, and you know, the education system is, you know, the thing you should engage with and what have you. So I was kind of finding myself torn between, you know, he needs to be in education, he needs to do these things, you know, to have a bright future, and etc., despite the fact that I could see that
It's almost that, I imagine for me,
it was killing him.
thing of, yeah, I imagine for me there'd be that thing of, but maybe if he's included or if he's this, maybe it could be the thing that makes him thrive. But then, like you say, that mother's instincts then, like, but it is killing him on a daily basis to go through this. Whereas ultimately there will be places that he thrives. That's just not it.
Yeah. And then when the primary school that he goes to says to you that the reason he behaves the way he does is because he doesn't get punished enough. And therefore you are the problem. Like, you, the mother, are the problem. Yeah, he sort of...
I don't know why there wasn't a little cozy mystery murder at that point. To go back to what I don't understand.
That was pre-diagnosis, but it didn't improve after diagnosis. So finally, when he was 7, because of the escalating situation at school, and obviously because he was getting older and he was still doing these things, we finally did get some intervention from the local authority. We did have an occupational therapist come out and observe him in school. And she gave recommendations, but also said that she really thought he needed an autism assessment. So we finally got one. In fact, I think we probably had the last multidisciplinary assessment that took place in Essex before it, the system completely went to hell and nobody can get an appointment or get anywhere. And
so basically, is that still like that now?
Yeah, still a big problem. Yeah, so we went to his assessment, and it's quite a full on, like a full ADOS assessment. So basically they interview parents, are interviewed separately by a professional, I can't remember who it was. And then the child is taken away and they do activities with, and it's observed by at least 4 specialities, psychotherapy, psychiatrists, just a whole gamut of people. And when we arrived, they said, just so you know, this, we'll be doing all this today, but it's very likely that we will need to, go away and think about it and make our decision, because it's very nuanced and, sometimes it can be difficult to be very sure and certain, and, it can take a month for us or even longer for us to make our decision. So we did all the assessment and it took about, I don't know, we were there a good 2-3 hours, and they said, oh, well, just wait outside and, we'll have our discussion. And then we'll have a meeting with you and we'll sort of say where we're up to. I think we were outside for 10 minutes and then we went in and they said, your son is autistic. That took them 10 minutes.
Well, that's just them just checking a box and saying, well, we can't tell them straight away, but...
he's so you couldn't meet a more autistic person than my son. And stupidly, we thought everything was going to get better.
Yeah.
But it didn't. It actually got worse. So, yeah. That's a whole nother can of worms.
That is a whole nother can of things that I didn't fully really expect that we were going to talk about today, but that's why I love doing the podcast. So we've gone through all of that. We've gone through the having the children, which I think women struggle with, go back to work anyway, or the parent, if that's the case. And then we've had an autistic child that you're then, obviously you didn't go back to work at all because, as you said, there's just certain things that happen in life that it's not even a decision. You just realise that you haven't been in the office in a couple of weeks. Things you're having to deal with. So when did you decide, I'm now going to write?
So it kind of happened during COVID, but it had been the history of it is that we moved house because we wanted my son to go to a secondary school that had a lot more autism friendliness, shall we say. And we were lucky enough that we found one not that far away from where we've always lived on the Essex coast. So we moved and he started going to that school. And again, it wasn't straightforward, but they did actually get him. They understood him. They knew why he behaved in the way he did at certain times, and they tried to work with him. Things actually, once he got to about sort of 14, things improved. And when I say improved, I don't mean it was all hunky-dory, but it was better. It was better. And I started thinking, oh, maybe I can actually get back to doing something for me, because I hadn't really been doing anything other than being his advocate and kind of caring and all those kind of things. And I thought, oh, brilliant. I'm going to get some time for me, mate. I could actually start to see a glimmer of me having something for myself. And then just when that happened, I got sick. So I woke up on Christmas Eve. It would have been 2000 and I don't know. I'm trying to think. We've been lived in this house about 8 years, and it was just about then. So when does that take us back to? So about
2017?
Yeah, about 2017, 2018. I woke up on Christmas Eve morning, and we were going to go to the cinema that day. And when I got out of bed, all of a sudden the world was going around and around and around and around and around and around, like at about 900 miles an hour, as if I was on like the worst like waltzer you've ever been on. And then I crawled to the toilet and was like really sick and not very well, and then crawled back into bed. And there I stayed for 2 weeks, like literally not able to move at all, because every time I moved, the world was just going, oh, it was horrible. Vertigo. Like, it's really hard to explain if you've never experienced it, but for anyone who's had vertigo, it is just, it's the pits.
I've never had it. I know some people who have had it, but there's also then like a spectrum of it as well to the extremities. But even people I know who have been sitting talking to me saying I've got vertigo at the moment, it's awful because it's like that torture thing. It's like that constant thing, like could be used as a torture to get somebody to talk.
It's just the pits, because you can't, like, you literally can't focus on anything other than the fact, like, where am I? You know, I'm going to fall off the world. It literally feels like you're going to fall off the world. It's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like that for 2 weeks. And then I slowly began to recover and didn't think anything more of it. I probably had labyrinthitis, which is like, you know, like if you get like a coldy fluey virus, or sometimes it can go into the labyrinths in your ear. And then that affects your balance, obviously. And then your brain gets the wrong message and you think the world's going round and round. Didn't think anything more of it. And then 2 years later, got up in the morning, same thing happened. Round, sick, horrendous. And I was thinking, it's fine, it'll be gone in a couple of weeks, it's all right. 3 weeks later, still the same, like barely get out of bed. Managed to drag myself to the doctors. The doctor said, labyrinthitis, and you'll get better. It just, sometimes it takes time. Never did, never got better. And I spent the next 5 years, I think, seeing every kind of doctor specialism that you can think of, trying to find an answer as to why I was now living in this world where everything moved. I constantly felt like I was on a boat, you know, like sort of up, and that kind of that horrible swelly kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I felt sick the whole time. I lost so much weight. I mean, the pictures of me, I do actually look like a skeleton. You know, I'd lost so much weight because I couldn't eat. And then the other thing about dizziness or vertigo is that obviously when you feel unsteady or dizzy, your body reacts by sending you an anxiety signal. It sends you the fear signal, because obviously it's trying to protect you from falling over and hurting yourself. And for people who suffer ongoing balance problems, what often happens, and what happened to me, is that anxiety response is triggered so much that it doesn't switch off. Eventually, it doesn't switch off.
Mm-hmm.
So you are living in a constant anxiety state, like you're having a panic attack, like 24 hours a day. And that was almost worse than the dizziness in the end. So yeah, I got to some really dark places.
So is that something you still
period.
deal with now through medication, through strategies? What is it that...
So I did eventually get an answer, but only because A, I don't take no for an answer very well. B, I'm as stubborn as a mule. And C, I think because when I was a lawyer, I did medical, and I sometimes did medical negligence work and something. So I do have some kind of understanding of like medical terms and what have you. So I was able to advocate for myself and say, when I was told you're anxious, that's why you're dizzy, because that's eventually what happened. I was able to say, no, you're wrong. That isn't true. That's not what's happening.
That came after, it didn't come before.
Yeah. And I kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And eventually I found a specialist balance clinic at UCL in London, which is obviously a big teaching hospital. And by sheer force of will, forced one of these doctors to give me a referral, because getting a referral is just a nightmare. It took me 5 years, but I got a referral. And when I went there and they did all these tests and everything, and they said to me, you have a balance disorder. You're not going mad. You are anxious, but it's because of the balance disorder. And unfortunately, this is your new normal, but you can do exercises and things to improve things, and you can have counselling to sort of help you come to terms with it and to deal with it in the best way you can.
Mm-hmm.
I think I probably cried for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Because I finally felt that
It's that relief that you have an answer, but then the realization that there's no fix.
Yeah. So there isn't a fix.
No.
There isn't a fix. I do take medication for anxiety because it was just raging. It was out of control, and I know a lot of people can be sniffy when you say to them, I take anxiety medication. But I take it, and I didn't want to take it. It wouldn't have been my choice to take it. But I was in such a bad place. Like, I wasn't leaving the house, Diane. I couldn't leave the house. I was too scared to open the front door. There was a time when the thought of opening the front door to the postman was so terrifying to me that I just wouldn't do it. I couldn't I couldn't get in a car. I was stuck in the house. I was like sat there thinking, I'm going to be an agoraphobic if I'm not it was getting that way. So I took the medication. It took a long time to find the right ones, and I still take it now because I still get days like today's it's not too bad. Like, it's there, but I can kind of ignore it. But there are other days when I'll wake up and I'll know that it's not going to be a good day. And again, I kind of feel slightly like, when you've had that one gin and tonic too many,
mm-hmm.
And you're like, no, now I'm going to lie in bed all night thinking, like, feeling war, like that. It's that, but it's 24 hours a day. It's draining. It really is, can be very, very draining.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling like you're having a panic attack at the same time the whole time is not a lot of fun.
So how in all of that did you decide? And this is what fascinates me. And it's a conversation that we've had a lot, because people will say to me, and this conversation we've definitely had a lot, about me being confident. And I've said, actually, if you know me, you'll know that I'm actually the least confident person anyway. It's courage. And it's courage about the things that I care about. And it's things that I care about, which is why I am quite a mothering person. Even before I had children, like within my friendship group, it was always like, oh, Diane's like the mother hen. And even though I wasn't maternal, I looked after everybody. I would know. And if I have those responsibilities, I can literally do anything. Take away those responsibilities, and like you, postman knocks on my door, I'm not answering it. Like, actually, no, somebody knocks on my door and we're not expecting anybody, I ain't answering it. If I can't see that he's got my Amazon parcel in his hand, I'm not answering it. And I understand that coming from anxiety and stuff as well. And I think it's when there has been trauma, or there has been situations, or there has been illnesses, or there has been things that happened in your life, which obviously you've told us so caringly about what's happened in yours. So in all of that, why did you then decide, I'm going to write books about people getting murdered in really happy places.
Yeah, it's a bit of a jump. This is going to sound really mad, but my mind was so full of fear. I think my mind was so full of what's the point in carrying on? Like, what use am I? What can I, what I can't be a good mum. And I was telling myself all those things that we tell ourselves, when life's given us a knock, I can't be a mum. I can't go back to work. I'm not a good wife. I'm not able to do all the things I was doing before. Who am I? What is my purpose? What is the point of me? Woe is me, because I think, again, you get yourself into that spiral of like, why is this happening to me? Have I not had enough to deal with, with all the troubles we've had, with our son and,
I know you just want to shout into the void, give me a break.
Yeah.
Just give me 2 minutes, 2 minutes world. Just let me catch my breath.
Yeah. And I think because I'd started the counselling and started talking about, those feelings and how angry I was at having just found a chink of light only for it to be snatched away.
Do they think, or do you think, or does a therapist think, whoever they are, do you think that, that thing, like, we used to work in family businesses, and when we all went home at Christmas, and there was me, my dad, my 2 sisters, brother-in-laws, like lots of people involved in family business. And my mum couldn't wait to get us all home at Christmas. There was also a little bit of her that was just like, seriously, you'd all come and collapse. Like, it's like the relief. And we closed our businesses over the Christmas period. It was the only time throughout the year that they were ever closed. So therein, it was the only time our phones were not needed. We were like attached to our phones 24/7 up until like that point. Mum was like, you just collapse. One gets flu, one gets sickness, one can't keep their eyes open, one gets a headache, you just all collapse. Like Christmas Eve, just like these bodies like strewn. And we had lovely Christmases, but it was this funny thing. Do you think there was that kind of, your body was just like, had been in fight and flight mode for so long that it was just like, I can't take anymore. Something needs to break.
Yeah, I think I definitely do. Combined with menopause, I think. Because it was all happening at the same time. But no, I think you're right. I think it was probably stress induced.
Because it's that thing, like when you're running on adrenaline, your body almost protects you. But when you stop and that adrenaline suddenly goes, are we getting safe? It'll come down and the body's like, yeah, we'll see, all that time I was like kind of not working properly. So here, have these symptoms. And you see it time and time again. And because I live with a chronic illness, I can tell the difference between a flare up that sometimes come from stress, or when I've been more stressed and my symptoms go crazy, as opposed to, now I'm not saying chronic illnesses all come from stress, but stress doesn't help anybody. Stress is inflammation. Inflammation causes chronic illnesses. And I do everything to think, right, coming up to stressful period, what can I do different? So, but it's just so interesting that you just used the term, I just saw a glimmer of light and then I was hit with this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not lost on me, the timing.
No, I definitely think it was, my body finally going, do you know what? You've been battering me with all this stuff, and now it's my turn to just go.
Yeah,
I'm tired. I've had enough.
So I'm going to force you to lie down, and this is the only way I know how.
Yeah, for 6 years. Thanks very much. So like my brain is always busy. My brain is loud. My brain doesn't give me a break. And again, this is only something I've realised probably since having this problem and then having the counselling that I had for it and talking about, me and kind of the way my brain operates. So I kind of decided that I needed to fill my brain with something else, and that maybe is a strategy that I need to use like for the rest of my life, because Otherwise, what my brain does is when it hasn't got anything to think about or focus on, it thinks and focuses on stuff that is, like, what if, what if my daughter breaks her leg and someone stabs her or something like that? Like, I will go to the worst, like my brain will go to the worst possible overthinking kind of nonsense. So I have to fill it with something else. And I've always loved books. Like, I am a book lover. Our house, as I say, my parents were both teachers. Their parents were teachers. Our house as a kid growing up was always just chock up with book. Like, even like my bookcase that's in the other room is like my book, like the bookcases we had in our house. Like, it's not neat. You see all these lovely social media ones of everything's all neat and wrote. Mine isn't like that. There's like things
I have to put them on
all
top.
sort of shoved in because there's so many. There's so many.
When we bought the house that I'm currently sitting in, we didn't have children or a dog at that time, and we had a couple of spare rooms, and one of the spare rooms got named the library because of my books. And I'm in an old Victorian house, so 2 alcoves in that room. We then got shelves made so they kind of like look like they belong in the space, and it is still to this day filled with all my books. And I have boxes from my university days in the loft, which I can't currently fit anywhere. So yeah, I absolutely love, and I love books. Don't get me wrong, Kindles have their place. I think they're great things. I do read on a Kindle, but there is nothing like cracking the spine of a book, sticking your nose in. I love books. Slight downside is the library in our house makes me sound quite grand, is actually now the playroom, but my eldest still calls it the library, so she tells her friends when they want to come round and play, you can come round and play in my library, and I'm like, it's just a spare room. Makes us sound like we live in wings. The library's in the East Wing, but it's not. It's just a room where all my books, so it got nicknamed the library.
That's so
So
cool.
it's probably never going to change, and I'm probably always going to call it that. But yeah, that's how much we love books in this sense. So you decided to write your own.
Yeah, so I thought, well, I saw this thing on Facebook, as you do. It's based in the States. It's called it's shortened to NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, which happens in November. And basically, it's like a not-for-profit thing. And they raise money for charity. They raise money for reading programs around the world, etc. And basically, you sign up to write 50,000 words in November. So bear in mind, I've never written a book. I don't really know where to start. I wrote as a kid. Like, I loved writing as a kid. I won a short story competition when I was 11 and like had my photo in the paper.
You did that when you were 11 and you still decided to become a lawyer.
Yeah. And I just saw it and I thought, well, if that isn't going to keep my mind busy on something that isn't all this other rubbish, I don't know what is. So I thought, well, I haven't got anything. I'm not doing anything else. So yeah, I'll just give it a whirl. That was literally my thinking. I'll give it a whirl.
But that's often, like, when I said that people always say to me, like, confidence, courage, debate, and then quite often, I think, like you come across that you have a lot of self-awareness. That self-awareness to know that you're in a dark place, but you need to get yourself out of it, to not allow yourself to get to the point where there is a point of no return, to understand where you are and want to do something about it. And I think there must be something in people, and it is about courage and being bold, but that quite often the best bold moves I've made is from a point of, well, I've literally got nothing to lose. It can't get any worse. I'm not feeling great, and I need to take an action that is just going to change this trajectory, good or bad. It doesn't really matter what it does, but it just needs to move because I can't stay here. And that's what that sounds like, that was the catalyst for you. That it was a short goal. A month is a short amount of time, especially when you've been dealing with, different needs for your child for quite a few years by this point, your own health, as well as your family unit, as well as keeping all of that together. A month is nothing.
Yeah, I think that helped. That it was, and I think this is gonna sound funny. I think it also helped that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, or B, what I was letting myself in for.
No preconceived
No.
ideas, no expectation. You weren't doing this to become a millionaire by Christmas. You were doing this because you needed to do something for you, and almost prove to yourself that you could.
Yeah, I think that was it. I think that was the more than anything. It wasn't even about, writing a book necessarily, or writing the best story, or it was literally about, me feeling like I was completely useless, worthless, had no reason for existing anymore even. And so it was more about, I can fill my brain with something other than all these thoughts, which I know are not doing me any good. And B, maybe if I can do it, I can prove something to myself that I still can do things. I think that was a big part of it.
Well, definitely, and it's that thing that I constantly remind myself, and I have to go back and say to myself, you can do hard things. You have done hard things before, and you can do it again. When you're like, well, like you say, I am useless. And the podcast episode that came out this morning is all about failure, because last week I just felt like a huge failure in all walks of my life. And I was just like, it's just a feeling. It's just the way you're feeling this week, and you're feeling this way because your health is rubbish. There has been a few kind of rubbish things that have happened, but also look at the good things that have happened. You're concentrating, you're putting the spotlight on the wrong area, and I just think we just need to remind ourselves of the things that we have done over and over and over again to, our brains and our bodies keep the data. If we keep telling it that this is who we are, it will become it. So if you want to become something different, you need to start thinking about the words that we use.
Yeah. I'm not very good at that. I'm very good at
I know.
I'm very good at being quite mean to myself. I'm very good at setting myself ridiculously unrealistic expectations. And again, I think that's part of, the idea that I formed of myself, of who I needed to be, and who, like, I told myself it was who I wanted to be. And then I kind of inhabited it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know why. It just, that was just a thing that happened.
Having these checkpoints throughout your life that you're like, right, okay, I'm telling myself this, but I still think I can be somebody different, or you never would have done that month. So you do that. You do that month.
Yep.
Did you write the 50,000 words?
I did.
Oh my God. That's awesome. And then was that your first book?
It was crazy. Still don't know how I did it, to be honest. Yeah, so I wrote, but because I didn't know anything about publishing. I was literally just doing it as a challenge, to challenge myself, to fill my brain with something else. And because I just love stories. I love, like, the feeling that there's another world in my head that I can just inhabit, like, just by switching it on in my mind, just that knowing that I can leave whatever rubbish is going on in real life and go somewhere completely different, where I can be someone different, where I can be whatever I want to be, or just not be anything, just watch. And I've always had that in my life. Like, I've always had that love of just imagination, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I ever really recognized it. Like, I've never thought of myself as creative. I've never thought of myself as someone who has that imagination or creates things in that way, because I was always told that I am an academic, I am a logical law was logical to me. There's a scenario, there's a law, there's a response, that kind of thing. And when I was about 9, a teacher said to me, I think we were doing some art thing. The teacher said, "Oh, that's not bad for you, considering you're absolutely not creative at all and you're no good at art." Okay, thanks.
It's like, but it goes back to that thing of, like, people getting put in boxes, and that you can't be logical and creative exactly the same time. It's like one doesn't exist with the other, which is just because I can't draw. Like, people ask me what my stick men are. It's, it's quite bad. But my sister's really artistic. It was that thing of the creative one or the smart one, or I don't know what one I was. I had a creative one and a smart one, and then I came along. So yeah, I don't know what that happened there, but it's just like you can be both. And creative doesn't mean that you can draw. And creative doesn't mean that you're good at art. Now, obviously, if you are somebody who's particularly artistic, then that you have creative flair, but that also doesn't mean that that person couldn't run a business. People can do hard things and lots of different things. And I just think to get pigeonholed, and quite often, and the more I'm learning about doing this podcast, is it's things that we have been told that then create this fear that stop us doing something in the future. That we go back to something we were told as a child, something we were told by somebody we loved, something that we're told when we got our first job. And then all of a sudden, like, well, I can't be that person because that person told me that I was rubbish, or I can't do that because that person told me this. And you're like, well, no, bollocks to that.
Yeah.
No, but it's you hear it time and time again.
Yeah. So when I was really like in my sort of primary school years, like I loved dancing. Like I loved it. I loved ballet and I performed in shows. And then when I went to secondary school, I did drama and I did like musicals, and I loved like acting and performing. So obviously all those things are creative. But I think, again, because I was told you're so academic, don't waste it. You've got all these talents, you're going to do this, you're going to, have an amazing career and stuff. I actually gave all those things up. I gave them all up. I didn't carry on dancing. I didn't carry on doing drama or anything like those things, because I just focused on, I knew it was going to be tough to, do a law degree and do everything. And I just kind of went all in on that. But now with the benefit of hindsight, I look back and I think, why did I do that? Because I loved those things, but I gave them up.
It's just it's what we're told and what we tell ourselves. They are the biggest blocks for people, and the big things that stop them, the biggest hurdles that stop them moving forward. So I love that your life has come full circle and you now are creative. And not only are you creative, you're now building a business off of being creative. So not only are you an author, you've now got a business doing that. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I do love writing. I love writing the stories, but it takes quite a long time to write a book and then edit the book and then get the book out and etc. etc. I just wanted to do something else with cozy crime, and because it is quite a niche genre, and I certainly think like in the US it's huge. In the UK people do love it, but I don't think they know that they love cozy crime. They just know that they like those kinds of programs. And I wanted to create something where I could kind of let other people experience the way I experience getting lost in a story. I kind of like when I write, I find it, like I explain this to people and they look at me like I'm slightly deranged. But anyway, when I write my stories, when I write the books that I'm writing, I actually see and hear what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a bit like I'm kind of like flying above sort of the action, and it's like a film. I kind of see it like a film. And if I don't see it, I find it really hard to write it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's obviously something to do with my brain and how my brain is set up.
A lot of authors who write fiction would say to you really similar things, because I think when authors, particularly ones who have like a series of books and the same characters come back and back again, they say like, no, it's the character tells me where they want to go. And it does sound completely Like you have the little voices in your head talking to you type stuff.
Yeah.
But so many say that that's what it is and the books come to life. But to me, as a lover of books, that's the books that I love to read when I know that that's what's gone into it, because when I'm reading, I can hear it and I can share in that kind of love and understanding. And whereas I think, when we read bad books, that they've just been churned out for whatever reason they get churned out for. But yeah, the ones that I really love, it's like I can see what I'm getting taken on the story by the characters, but yes, also the writer, because the writer is creating this world that you can immerse yourself in. And I don't just mean even, like fantasy novels and stuff like that, because that's the obvious one to think they're creating a cool world. I mean, chick lit. I mean, stuff that's story led. But yeah, that's.
Yeah, I mean, every single book has its world, every single story, doesn't matter what it is, that the writer is creating a world that they fashion as the backdrop for whatever's happening in the story. And I say, I want more people to be able to experience that kind of immersion in the story. I decided to create a box where I pair a cozy crime novel, not mine. Maybe in the future there might be mine in it, but so it's such a hard job, because what I end up having to read lots and lots of cozy crime books. It's a tough life.
Somebody's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it. So I read lots and lots of cozy crime, pick like some amazing books from authors that maybe, people haven't heard of before. There are so many books published that kind of never see the light of day, or, don't necessarily get the audience that they deserve. And I think that's such a shame. So I'm kind of like helping my author community at the same time, because I'm showcasing their books. And then as I read the story, I find moments where I can kind of hook a gift item to that particular moment in the story. So, for example, the sleuth is a wintry kind of tale, and the sleuth is tucking into a massive vat of hot chocolate and marshmallows. So in the box, there might be, a nice gourmet hot chocolate. So as the sleuth is drinking her hot chocolate, you open the gift at that page and you get to enjoy the same thing. And it just brings the whole book almost to another level. I think it's it's not just a book. You're not just reading the book. You're actually almost living the book. You're unwrapping the book.
In it. You're immersed in, when I read books and there is things that come up, you do think about the sounds and the smells and the feelings and the touch and all those things. The fact that you're actually creating that as well, just the connection is, because as humans, we want all of our senses. We want to enjoy all of our senses. It's such a huge part of being human. So to bring that in, and because books are so many people's joy, I think having that immersive experience is just such a beautiful thing to have.
Yeah, I love creating it. I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun, like shopping. I mean, it's kind of like I said, it's
You're reading books and you're shopping. I mean, my dream job. I'm getting it all wrong.
Yeah, it's very, I just, I love it because it's kind of very cathartic, really, because you are just, I'm constantly thinking while I'm reading the story, I'm constantly thinking, as a reader, what would I like to be doing while I'm there with my, with my emotional support water bottle and my fluffy blanket, and, what other things would just make that moment extra, extra special. And it's kind of pulling those things in and turning that into something that is delivered to people. So, there's no hassle. You haven't got to choose a book. You haven't got to sift through thousands of reviews on Amazon trying to pick the perfect item. You haven't got to go to the shops and think, oh, I'd like, wouldn't it be nice if I had a nice little sort of gourmet snack with this while I'm having my reading moment, because this is the only moment I get to myself You know, I'm a mum, I've got kids, I work, I don't have time to go to the shops to get myself not something nice to do each month. Yeah, so it's kind of all of those things. And I'm trying to package it in something that I could just send to you so you can get that through your door every month and go, like, this is for me, and this has been created with care and love and an understanding of this type of book and why people love it. And that's the bit sometimes that I think people miss, is because they think cozy crime is about murder. And it isn't.
No, it's exactly that. We've had many conversations, because I've told you that I'm a big fierty and I can't watch anything where people, certainly not on my own in anyway. And I used to laugh in my mum and dad's house when it got to 9 o'clock. I'd be like, right, who's getting killed tonight? That's what are we watching on the telly? But then when you told me about the genre and you told me about the types of programs it would be like, and I'm thinking, so many, and you're right about the UK, and I know as we work together on your business, full transparency, I know that, you know, part of what you're doing is like an education of, this is cozy crime. If you watch Death in Paradise, you're going to like cozy crime. If you watch Midsummer Murders, you're going to like cozy crime. And there's probably like, there's so many that I think about where it's that tongue in cheek, but somebody's murdered thing. It's bizarre. But there's
It's because
so
it's
many.
British.
Okay.
That's why it's bizarre. It's because it's
And
British.
it's always that joke, isn't it? Like, well, you wouldn't want to live there. You wouldn't want to live there. There's somebody dying every other week there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's that there's so many people, but I think for them to understand that it is actually a genre that they like, and also for them to know that that is, because I think for me as well, sometimes with my books, sometimes I pigeonhole myself too much in the books that I read. I only like this type of books. And it was only when I pushed myself out of that kind of comfort zone of what I read, I'm like, oh, I really enjoyed that. So I think that people need to understand that what they are enjoying is cozy crime. And that's, you know, that thing, because people will say about true crime, and you see that everywhere. You see it in podcasts, on Netflix. I mean, it's everywhere now. We've all watched the documentaries of the true crime stuff. And I think some people enjoy that. But for me, I need to be in a certain place for that, because it can be harrowing and it can stay with me. And I'm quite an empath, so it stays with me for longer than it should. Whereas a cozy crime might be a little bit friendlier, a little bit cozier, and a little bit kind of more escapist than kind of what you need it to be. So if somebody does want to come and find more about cozy crime, more about your own books, and also about this beautiful subscription box, where can they come and find you?
So you can find me in most places on the Tinternet, as we call it. You can find me on Facebook. You can connect with me. My personal profile, which is slightly strange, is lou.collins.emerson, because I have to keep explaining to people that I'm Emerson, but I write as Collins.
We all like a complicated story every now and again.
We do. And if you want to check out the box, you can find us at Cosy with a Z, readbooks.com. And you can find all the information, you know, on there in terms of what we offer. Great time to do it at the moment. We've got Mother's Day coming up, and I don't know about you, but killing plants/flowers doesn't light me up, whereas solving a murder in a quaint little village with lots of hijinks and female friendships and playing detective seems much more exciting to me.
And I know women of a certain age, my age-ish, your parents are watching these programs, you want to be getting them this box. They will absolutely love it. Now, as you know, I ask everybody 3 questions before they come on the podcast. We have touched on yours a little throughout, as tends to be the case, because what fills us with joy is what we want to talk about. So the first one I'll ask you is your joy spotlight, which is a favourite thing that has shaped your life, business or work. And I don't think yours will come as any surprise.
Well, spoiler, mine obviously is stories, books, stories, particularly as a safe haven, I think. The power of being able to escape into a world where your day-to-day problems just vanish, even for just half an hour, is something I'm not really sure anything else much provides it in the same way, I think.
No, I don't think so either. And I think I've often thought about this because I love music and I'll use music to change my mood. Or enhance a mood, or we've all been the teenager that cried to love songs in our bedrooms type thing. I may or may not still do that, and I've always used music to change a mood. But I think from books, and what I got from a very, very young age from books, was the ability to dream and the ability to learn about different places, different cultures, different lands, and people will say to me, some of the weirdest knowledge, and it's because I read. I read everything. I read articles. I read the back of cereal boxes. I just read. And I always have. And I think that's truly where my understanding of the world has come from and will continue to come from, both from the fictional read and the non-fiction. But I think it allows you to truly escape.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think also people don't appreciate that reading actually teaches you on a lot of different levels things that you may not appreciate that it's teaching you. So, you learn about empathy, you learn about people who are different to you, you learn new ideas, you learn things about yourself, you learn about courage, you learn about kindness. Reading for only 6 minutes a day can reduce your stress levels by something crazy like 78%. Now, little throwaway statistic for you.
But it's so true. And one of the biggest changes I've made, and it's a change that I always come back to, and I'm determined it's not slipping this time, is reading when I go to bed. Because, and we've had this conversation within the Joy Work Members Club, that there's certain things in your life you can't change that are challenging at the time. And mine is at the moment is sleep deprivation from having 2 young children. And I can't fix that overnight. It is not going to be fixed overnight, but I can make sure, which is what I do, that I'm in bed no later than 10, sometimes earlier. I'm ready for bed and I'm reading a book and not scrolling on my phone or watching the TV, so that when I go into a much more natural sleep, much quicker, even when it's a great book that I'm reading, but my mind is also a little bit quieter because I've been focusing on this other world rather than my own mind. And I can change that, which means I'm more rested. I'll still get interrupted sleep, but it's better than me trying to work on the laptop up till the wee hours of the night and then waking up in a stressy mood.
Yeah, definitely. It's so good for you. It really is.
It is. It's the best thing. The next one is inspired by joy. So something or someone that has inspired you.
Yeah, so there are so many books, obviously, that I could have mentioned. So many books, but I would be here probably for a year if I told you all the books that have inspired me. But
Same
no,
here.
I think ultimately my children inspire me for different reasons. So my son inspires me every single day because he truly embodies resilience, and he's only 18. And when I think of the obstacles he's already had to overcome in his 18 years, and he still has to deal with those every single day, things that we take for granted, like we're sat here wearing our clothes and mostly we're not aware of anything uncomfortable or scratchy or, whereas for him, any sensation like that is provoking his system, his nervous system all the time. So just being is difficult for him, let alone all the other things, and he's gone to university this year. He's gone away to university,
Which
which
is amazing.
we never thought he would do. It's still difficult. He still has struggles. He's still very up and down, but he just never gives up, and he's still doing it. He's still trying. So I just don't think you can help but be inspired by that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And quite often our children are inspirations for keeping going and our whys and everything else. But I think when you have a child who does have those extra needs and continues to go above and beyond to live a life, I think it can be very humbling for the rest of it.
It can put things into perspective at times.
Yeah.
And then my daughter, she inspires me because she has obviously had to grow up with the situation that there wasn't an equal focus on the two of them. You know, we very much as parents say, oh, you know, I don't have a favourite and, you know, I have to spread my time between the two things, etc. And we would all love to do that. But in this situation, it just wasn't possible. And she's never once complained. She's never raised it as a, you know, oh, I'm hard done by because X, Y, Z. And she's so supportive of her brother and she's so kind to him and she really knows how to communicate with him. And sometimes when we can't get through to him, she can. And she's just an amazing young woman. She really is.
Oh, I almost want to finish it there because it's such a lovely way to finish, but I've got 2 other questions that I asked. So the next one is your joy killer, the thing that you would like to see banished from the world.
Yeah, I think I've probably talked quite a lot about it today.
Yeah.
So it's these expectations, it's these stories that we are told or that we tell ourselves maybe, these arbitrary things, the way our world has a habit of trying to pigeonhole people into you're this type of person, you're this type of person, this is a good type of person, this is a not good type of person, this is success, this isn't success. All those expectations and pigeonholes, the world would be so much happier if we just gave up all that shit and just...
That's it. And a lot of people ask me why joy is part of now everything that I do when I'm not particularly... When you picture the word joy, there's not a picture of me in the dictionary. Let's put it that way. But it's because I truly believe that everybody should be allowed to have joy every single day. And if they don't have a little bit of joy in every single day, something's going wrong. And they either need support or they need help or the system is broken, which we know a lot of them are. Success is amazing and everybody should have it, but success doesn't look like one thing. Success isn't a particular prescription. And I think it just has to be dropped. And as somebody who's seen lots of different types of successes and great levels of success, sometimes it's not all it's cracked up to be when you get that typical view. And I just think people just need to allow to be, to chase their joy, to stand up and say, this is what's going to bring me joy. And if it's not harming anybody and can pay their bills and give them the life that they want, that's enough. And likewise, if you want to have a gold-plated job, go and get it, But just think about, is that the thing that's truly bringing you joy?
Yeah,
And
mostly it isn't.
Yeah, exactly.
Life is very short. I know.
It is. And
because I'm 54 in a few weeks, and I already feel like sometimes I feel I've got so much I want to do. So I have so many ideas of so many different things, and I'm like, why did I not discover this earlier? So I just have to make the most of the time I've got.
That's exactly it. You can look back, and I feel exactly the same. And I think, why did I wait to become a mother to the age that I did? Why did I wait to this age to start a business? Imagine where I'd be if I started it 10 years ago. But maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been anywhere, because maybe 10 years ago, I wasn't ready for this particular challenge. Maybe 10 years ago, I needed to be doing something different. Maybe 10 years ago it certainly wasn't about supporting me, but maybe 10 years ago was about supporting other people. And we just have to realize that this might be our path, but to make the most of it. And I think one thing you can say, Lou Emerson, .collins, .author, .subscription box owner, is that you are living, breathing example that we can all do hard things. We can all get over hurdles, and that pigeon boxes can need to be destroyed because you have broke out of every single one that somebody's tried to put you in. And I think that's a pretty good place to be. So I ask everybody one last question before they go, and that is your joy legacy. What bit of joy would you like to leave behind?
I think spreading the joy of stories to as many people who need them in their life, which, as far as I'm concerned, is every single person who walks the planet. If I can feel like I've converted someone to the story side, I think that won't be a bad thing to
I
leave
think that's
behind.
amazing. I think that's amazing, and I think you're well on your way to doing that. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing so much of your story with us. I think there is something for lots of people in there to take away. Thank you for joining me today, Lou.
Thanks for having me.
Wowee, that was a conversation, wasn't it? That was probably my longest recording and my most difficult to edit because there was very little fluff in the conversation that we were having. Lou's journey is such a powerful reminder that success isn't about sticking to the plan. It's about following what truly lights you up. And when you do follow what truly lights you up, then you can create a community and a business who gets who you are. And the fact that Lou has used this creativity to not only change her life and find her purpose and give herself purpose, she's creating a business out of it as well. If the subscription box is something that you think you would like, or your family would like, or your friends would like, with Mother's Day coming up, it's definitely something I know the mums in my life would like. The link to have a look at it is in the show notes. But here are my top 3 takeaways from my conversation with Lou. That passion fuels resilience, whether it's writing or any other creative pursuit, or any pursuit indeed. Doing what you love helps you push through life's toughest moments. Number 2, that community matters. This is something that comes up again and again and again. And when I started my business, I was really naive about it. I had built a career over creating these communities within the businesses that I worked for, but I hadn't ever used the word community. So whether it's finding support as a writer, a parent, a business owner, or someone facing health challenges, connection is everything and can change anything. Number 3, you can rewrite your story. At any point in your life, after any challenge, at any age, you can change the trajectory of where your life is going. If something isn't bringing you joy, if something doesn't feel right anymore, if you know that there is something better, you can change course and no permission is needed. If you loved this episode, make sure to subscribe and share. It makes it so much easier for people to find the Joy Work Show. And indeed, if there's anything you want to tag me in of your thoughts to do with this podcast, I would love to see that too. And if you're feeling inspired to make a bold move, let this be your sign to go for it. What's the worst that could happen? Until next time, keep chasing joy and doing the work that matters.